Thanks for tuning in live to Proline TV, the Our Lads Football Network. We talk more college football as we're getting you ready for the 2025 season. And we're specifically talking about the Big 12 Conference and Iowa State. And for the first time, we're being joined by Alec Busse. And Alec covers the Cyclones for Cyclone Alert 247. You could also check out his work at KXNO, the first quarter. He's a co-host there. And Alex, thanks for taking the time to do this with us.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. It's always fun to hop on shows and be able to talk to Cyclones, especially with the season just about a month away.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had the opportunity to talk to someone that has been able to inform us of what's going on with the program. So real happy that we get this chance. This has been a very competitive program for quite a long time now. I can remember the days years back when Iowa State was a doormat in the Big 12. And now it does seem like it has been quite a long time, but that's just not been the case. They've been a very competitive team. And even lately, they've been competitive to win Big 12 titles. So that's what they're trying to do again this season as well. Would that be correct, that this is a Big 12 title or bust kind of season?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's Big 12 championship or bust. Just because of how wide open the conference is, it's really difficult to project it each year. I think you can describe it effectively as bowl season or bust at an absolute minimum for Iowa State and Matt Campbell as he enters his 10th season as Iowa State's head coach. Certainly with the type of schedule that they have, there's some favorable weeks and there's some challenging weeks, just like there is for every team in the country. But I think the way the schedule starts for Iowa State, we're going to get a chance to learn about them really quickly. They obviously play Kansas State and Ireland a week from today, that being August 23rd. Week 2 of the season, what is Iowa State's week 3 of the season, they get a chance to host rival Iowa. So 2 of Iowa State's first 3 games are both rival opponents. So there's an opportunity for Iowa State to potentially be as strong as 3-0. There's also an opportunity for them to be 1-2, assuming that they beat South Dakota, who is a good FCS program, but one that Iowa State should certainly beat and outclass at Jack Trice Stadium on August 30th. So, yeah, it's not Big 12 championship or bust, but it's definitely give yourself an opportunity to get to the postseason. And if you're in the picture for a Big 12 title, that's certainly an ultimate positive.
Well, do you think, considering they were right there at the doorstep last year, do you think that they have as much talent as last year? Or do you think, obviously you lose those 2 big stud receivers, that's huge. But overall, do you think that the depth chart, the roster, especially with a talented quarterback coming back like Rocco Beck, do you think that they look at it roster-wise as, hey, we got an opportunity to do what we did last year?
Yeah, I think internally they're optimistic that they can potentially compete for a Big 12 championship again, be in college football playoff discussions entering November throughout that last month of the regular season. If you're talking about on paper, I don't know if I think that this team is nearly as talented or as proven last year's team was. A year ago, if you look at like ESPN, Bill Connolly returning production stats, they ranked in the top 3 nationally, both offense and defense and overall. So this year's team doesn't have nearly as much coming back as they did a year ago. They lose 2 starters on the offensive line, including their starting left tackle, who was an NFL draft choice by the Indianapolis Colts. You mentioned the star receivers who are both day 2 selections, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. They both had over 1,000 receiving yards last year, and they were one of 2 duos nationally to each have to have 1,000 receiving yards. And on the defensive side, they lose 3 of their top 4 defensive linemen. The secondary sees some key departures as well. 2 of their top 3 corners, they see 2 starting safeties, including a team captain, depart. So there's more attrition on this year's roster than there was entering a season ago. But there are still inspiring pieces and reasons for confidence when you look at Rocco Beck, when you look at Dominique Orange, the starting defensive tackle that's in a preseason Big 12 selection. You look at some of the transfers that they were able to bring in, like Chase Sewell, the 2 running backs that are returning, I think offer some excitement for Iowa State. And then they do return a key piece at right tackle in Tyler Miller, who will enter his 3rd year starting at right tackle for Iowa State this fall. So there's reasons for optimism. I just don't know if on paper the roster is nearly as exciting as it was a season ago.
Okay, fair enough. Let's get it started here by first of all talking about the staff. We know the head coach is back. Are all the key coaches back? Are there any major changes?
Yeah, they've done a really good job throughout Campbell's tenure of retaining the staff and having a high level of staff continuity. The only assistant coach that moved on this offseason was Tyler Roll. He was their running backs coach a season ago. He's now with the Detroit Lions on Dan Campbell's staff. I think anytime you have an NFL team showing interest in you, that's obviously a hard thing for a college program to keep, especially when it's an assistant coach. And it's actually the second straight offseason that Iowa State has lost an assistant coach to an NFL organization. After the 2023 season, Nate Shieldhouse left Iowa State's offensive coordinating position to go to work for Sean McVay in a passing game coordinating type role for the Los Angeles Rams. So back-to-back off seasons, Iowa State has lost an assistant coach on the offensive side under Matt Campbell, but they replaced Tyler Roll with Jake Landry, who comes to Iowa State from North Dakota State. That's a program that Iowa State has plucked from for both coaches and players. Okay. Over the last few years, receivers coach Noah Pauley came to Iowa State via North Dakota State. And the Cyclones also poached former North Dakota State wide receiver Eli Green prior to last season via the transfer portal. Green didn't make a big impact, but Matt Campbell certainly has a lot of respect for the success of the Bison program over the last 10, 15 years. And he's trying to bring some of that to Ames. And he did that by hiring Landry.
Okay, going into camp soon. So how is the team health-wise? Any key guys that are going to be banged up coming into camp, or maybe even an issue starting the season, or are they pretty healthy?
Yeah, they actually started training camp here this morning on July 23rd. So 1 month out from season starting, they started training camp. Obviously, starting in week 0 gives them the opportunity to start a week before most teams around the country. Matt Campbell has said throughout the offseason that he's pretty comfortable with where the team is at from a health perspective. I don't know of any major injuries that they're facing right now. I know throughout the spring or the summer, freshman offensive lineman Will Tompkins was seen in a pretty large knee brace. But as December progressed, he was no longer in that knee brace. Tompkins isn't someone that they're likely to rely on this season. So I don't know how serious that is. In the spring, Chase Sewell, this transfer receiver I spoke about a little bit earlier, he's probably going to be their top receiver on the outside that helps them replace Higgins. He was in and out of the lineup a little bit. And then transfer defensive end Cannon Butler was someone who was in and out of the lineup during spring practices. But for the most part, it doesn't sound like anything too serious, which after what happened for the Cyclones a year ago, especially at the linebacker position, I think that's something that the staff and certainly the fan base is really excited about.
All right. Let's talk about the recruiting class. So the 2025 class didn't get rave reviews. But Iowa State's not easy. It's not an easy place to recruit from. But for Matt Campbell's tenure, what would be the average ranking, say, over at 247 that they've been getting? And what was their ranking this for the 2025 class? I'm assuming it was down a little bit.
Yeah, they're typically in the 40s or 50s, probably a little bit closer to the 50s than they are into the 40s. The 2025 class, I believe, finished 57th nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. They did have some significant wins in that class. Will Hawthorne, a local linebacker, 4-star prospect, is one of the players that I'm highest on in the class. He's a really good player. He's someone who I think has the opportunity to contribute for Iowa State this fall, potentially on special teams, perhaps on defense in various packages. On the offensive line, they had a really good late run of success shortly before signing day. They flipped Qual away from Purdue, which doesn't sound like a big deal considering Purdue lost Ryan Walters. Obviously decided to fire him. But Qual is another 4-star prospect that they're really excited about bringing in. And then they also flipped an offensive lineman from Stanford, Vea Akalulu. He's someone who, big kid. They put really good weight on him during, the spring and the summer. And he's gotten to a point where, size-wise, that's really exciting for them. But I don't think he's going to play too much. Another name that I think that they're excited about in the long term is quarterback Alex Mansky, an in-state prospect. He was only able to play about half of the games last season, just 6 games, because he partially tore his UCL But he was on track to be the top quarterback in the state of Iowa. He committed to Iowa State over serious pursuits from Kansas State and Texas A&M. Offensive coordinator Colin Klein really liked him, but Iowa State won. Mansky's recruitment, his rehab and his throwing schedule is ahead of schedule. Another significant win for them, and someone who I think could see the field this fall is probably Kamari Moore, someone who was previously committed to Oklahoma before he reopened his recruitment in the fall. Moore is a Kansas City area player, was a top 10 player in the state of Missouri in the 2025 recruiting class. Iowa State landed his commitment after he decommitted from Oklahoma after a previous pursuit from Nebraska is who they beat for Kamari Moore. So that's someone who I could see contributing. But typically Iowa State doesn't rely too much on true freshmen because they do such a good job of developing within the program and allowing players to cook in season before throwing them out onto the field in large roles.
And have you seen that still the case through the transfer portal the last couple of years? I know they obviously have, like everyone else, they have to add transfer guys, but for the most part, because that seems to be the case. I'm looking here at the updated RLAD's depth chart, and only a couple possible transfers on offense and on defense. And, I've already done several interviews with several teams. Matter of fact, I think Oklahoma State, I mean, they're just flooded with transfers on offense and defense. So that seems to be, I guess, the MO continues as far as developing more than worrying about transfers.
Yeah, Iowa State's not a program that's ever going to be able to go into the transfer portal and, I guess, be really aggressive in adding talent in that perspective. They're not the wealthiest program, right? Like, that's not a secret within the walls of Iowa State's program. They're also a program that tries its best to build through high school recruiting. I know every coach will say that at media days. I mean, turn on Big Ten media days this week. They're all going to talk about how they're a developmental program and how they prioritize high school recruiting. And they do, but some just do it more than others. I would say it's one of those schools that has to do it more than others because they don't have the resources to go to the portal and pay for a lot of players in the transfer portal. In terms of, starters this year who they probably have acquired through the portal, I don't think there's more than two on the offensive side of the ball, both of them likely at receiver, and Chase Sowell, who I've mentioned a few times, and Xavier Townsend, who comes to Iowa State via UCF. And that's kind of a unique situation. He's a 2022 high school class prospect. He was committed to Iowa State for several months during that recruiting cycle before flipping to UCF shortly before signing day. So not necessarily someone that they had within the program, but someone that they had extensive connection to, someone that they were really excited about in the 2022 class. So maybe a little bit different there. And then on the defensive side, you're probably going to see the most transfer impact along the defensive line. I think Tamatoa McDonough, transfer from Yale, who had 6.5 sacks last year in the Ivy League, will start for Iowa State at defensive end. And then in the secondary, I think you could see another starter on the defensive side. I would probably circle Trey Bell, a transfer defensive back from FCS Lindenwood. I project him to start opposite John Tez Williams. But other than that, I mean, it's not going to be more than those players. You might have a few more transfers contribute on the defensive line. Cannon Butler, transfer from Northern Iowa, and Vontroy Malone, a transfer from Tulsa, could also transfer to make an impact as a defensive end. But for the most part, it's high school recruited prospects at Iowa State.
Okay. And this is the other kid you said, right? Tamatoa McDonough?
Yep. He's a transfer from Yale, had 6.5 sacks last year. I believe he led the Ivy League in tackles for loss. He's someone that they need to make an impact for Iowa State this upcoming season for sure.
Okay. Let's now go over, because there's so much returning talent on offense. We know about Becht. Well, let's start with Becht. So what's the expectation? I don't know how long you've been following the program for years as far as the quarterback situation, but as far as Becht, I mean, obviously Purdy's right now in a class by himself. But as far as Becht, how does he compare to someone like Purdy?
I think with a strong season, he'll put himself in that category. I think some in Iowa State circles would already say he's in that category, to be honest with you. If he passes for 3,000 yards this season, he'll become the first Iowa State quarterback since at least the formation of the Big 12. So back in 1996 to throw for 3,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons. Brock Purdy never did that. Now, some would probably identify the 2020 season as, well, did he play enough games? He did. Like, they played 12 games and he fell short. of the 3,000 yard threshold. Now, Beck did it in 13 games last year, and it was 3,100 yards roughly in 2023. So it's kind of close, but it's close, but he did it. It's a counting stat. Last year, his total yardage increased to about 3,500 yards. His touchdowns went up to 25 on the season. I think that, he benefited greatly the last 2 years from being able to play with 2-star receivers. I don't know if nationally people knew, or even inside the Big 12, people knew how good Iowa State's top 2 receivers were last year until like mid-October, late November, somewhere within that stretch where it became clear that they're not Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka, but they're really, really good.
Yeah.
Like they were both day 2 NFL draft picks for a reason, and very few teams have two receivers of that talent level. It's now Beck's job, in my opinion, to elevate the offense around him, where, his first 2 years, he was able to rely on 2 talented receivers to help him come along. So I think it kind of transitions a little bit now to where there's more of an onus on him to produce at a higher level. I think certain goals for him, he's got to get the completion percentage back above 60%. That falling below 60% a year ago is something that I have identified as, I don't want to say concern, but an area that certainly catches your attention. I also think you want to see his yards per attempt get up closer towards 8. It was at 8.5 in 2023, his first year starting. It was closer to 7.5 last year. So can you get closer to 8, maybe find a happy medium, and continue to be someone who throws for 20 to 25 touchdowns, throws for 7 to 10 interceptions, because that's just what most quarterbacks are going to do when they throw it as much as him. Listen, I think he's a really good quarterback. There's so many good passers in the Big 12 this year. Entering the season, I think there's 9 who had at least 2,400 passing yards last season. If you wanted to rank Rocco Becht as your number 1 quarterback in the Big 12 entering the year, I wouldn't call you crazy. If you wanted to rank him number 7, I also would not call you crazy. I think it's really hard to separate guys in the Big 12, but I think Rocco Becht has shown throughout the last 2 years, he's got a really good ability to win football games, step up in key moments. You saw that last year with wins in comeback fashion against Iowa, against UCF, against Utah, certainly against Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Like, he's got a lot of gumption to him, and I think that that's just as important as anything else. So he needs to be better and elevate the people around him this year as he steps into his 3rd year as starting quarterback. But there's a lot of expectations and hope that he's able to do that. And, if he does do it, he's going to continue to cement himself as one of the 2 best quarterbacks in Iowa State history.
Okay. So staying on offense, give me some players that you think, again, from the holdovers, could take that next step. Like if you had to pick a breakout player or 2 on the offensive side.
Yeah, I would probably, maybe this is an interesting pivot point. You probably expect me to go to receiver or running back. I'm actually going to go to tight end.
Okay.
Gabe Burkle is one of the most interesting players on this roster, in my opinion. Ben Bramer, as a freshman tight end in 2023, was an All-American by 24/7 Sports and The Athletic. So that's a big deal. I think he's someone who has upside of being an NFL draft pick this upcoming year. Bramer does. And that's because as a freshman, he had about 350 receiving yards, a couple touchdowns. Last year he was hurt, and he didn't get more than 200 receiving yards. I think he only had 1 or 2 touchdown receptions. But he didn't really play in the last 7 or 8 games of the season. But during that time, Burkle exploded and replaced Bramer's pass catching ability.
Okay.
So in the first 6 or 7 games of last season, I think Burkle had 2 catches for 13 or 15 yards total on the year. In the last 7 games, he ended the season with 20 to 25 total catches with close to 300 yards. So the way I look at that is Iowa State potentially has 2 really dynamic tight ends, and they're a program that loves to run 12 personnel. Which Gabe Burkle shows up for Iowa State this year? The one who made an impact in the passing game in the second half of last season, or the one who was just kind of there in the passing game but wasn't necessarily involved in it in the first 6 or 7 games of last season? If the 2 of them are really reliable pass catchers, I think Beck's ability to contribute at a high level and help the offense move along early in the season will be at a higher point, because he's going to have to build rapport with Xavier Townsend and Chase Sowell, and I think he already has it with Bramer and Burkle. But Burkle's someone who just a weird, like, it's weird that he went from like a non-existent pass catcher to probably their third most reliable pass catcher once Bramer went down last year behind the two-star receivers. So I think Burkle's got true breakout potential, while Bramer also does. So I would identify those two tight ends as key players for Iowa State and just their overall offensive approach and scheme this year, because I think the tight ends are really important for them early in the season.
Yep, definitely going to need help there with the two big receivers gone. And of course, you mentioned the transfers. Do they have another receiver, a holdover receiver that you think is capable of being a big part of the offense?
There's a few names I could identify. Someone within the program that they're high on is Brett Skildson. He'll be a second-year player for Iowa State this year, a true sophomore. Contributed for them a lot on special teams last season. Wasn't someone who was heavily involved in the offense, but he had 2 catches, I believe, against Cincinnati last year that both led to first down conversions. That wasn't a game that was particularly close, but that's a step in the right direction for a true freshman. He's someone who's been talked about a lot, whether it be by Matt Campbell, coaches. Rocco Beck mentioned him at Big 12 Media Days as a name that could be a breakout candidate as well. Like I said, key player for them on special teams. They've had players throughout the decade of Campbell's tenure go from special teams contributor to major contributor on offense or defense.
Okay.
I think at best he's their third wide receiver. If it's not a Skildson, I think you can maybe identify Dominic Overby, another second-year receiver for them. He only had 1 catch, I think, last year. I think it also went for a first down, if I remember correctly. Carson Brown is a former walk-on. He had 10 or 12 catches last year for, 150 yards. He was like their third wide receiver option, but they didn't really have one because of how good Higgins and Knoll were. And then I would be kind of interested to see what Eli Green's role is for them. He was more productive early in the year, but then he just kind of like fell out of the rotation completely as the season progressed. And he enters his last year of eligibility. I'm just fascinated to see how they get him involved, if at all, this season. But in terms of ranking those 3, to me, it would go Skildson, Overby, Green in terms of wide receivers capable of making an impact behind Sowell and Xavier Townsend.
Okay. Who's Daniel Jackson then?
Yeah, interesting name there. So he has battled injury throughout his career. He missed last season because of a lower leg injury, missed the entire season, has battled injury throughout his career. I think this will be his 6th college season, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
To me, he's like a true X factor because he could be like a nice safety blanket, a nice possession guy for Iowa State. Back in the 2023 season, he had 2 touchdown receptions against Oklahoma State. That was a home win for Iowa State. And that was before Oklahoma State really figured things out and then made a run to the Big 12 championship game where they lost to Texas in pretty convincing fashion. But I think Jackson, there was a chance that he was going to be done with football based off of the injury from a year ago. But they, went through the process with him. They determined that he was capable of returning. He wanted to return. He was committed to returning. And I think his role is just kind of like up in the air. Like there's a world where he is their third receiver. There's a world where he's just kind of like a veteran voice leader, someone who's been in the program, holds people accountable, good locker room guy.
Okay.
I think it'll be interesting to see what he does for them, just because he, coming off of a very serious lower leg injury, we'll have to see what his ability to contribute is.
All right, the running game. Now we know that I think if we take a look back at Campbell's best teams, he always had a stud in the backfield. And I know as a Jet fan with Breece Hall more than anybody. So, with the 2, really big time backs that they've had there. And then since then, though, last few years, it's kind of been a little bit quiet. And that's been, it's been a part of the offense that's just been missing. Do you see any reason in the world that that's going to change this year? Because it looks like the same couple of veterans are returning. I don't know whether or not they're capable of another step up as far as their production is concerned, or, do they have someone else that might be able to step onto the field and do something special. How's the backfield look?
Yeah, I think there's two names at the top of it: Carson Hansen, Abu Sama. Hansen rushed for like 750 yards last season. I think he had 13 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. So 15 touchdowns is like a productive season.
Sure.
He's just not someone who you're necessarily going to see make a huge impact in terms of like explosive plays. I think that's something where nationally, like Abu Sama is more well known for that, right? When you think back to the way he played against Kansas State back in 2023 with the 3 touchdown runs of at least 60 yards. Sama has just lacked the consistency of a reliable back throughout his first 2 years. He takes too many negative plays. He takes too many plays that don't go for a positive gain or no gain at all. He dances too much, I think, and just doesn't see a hole and hit it and go upfield. There's a world where the two of them rush for 600 yards this year. I don't know how big of an accomplishment you think that is, like 2 backs for 600 yards. Some would say it's a big accomplishment. Others would say it's not a huge accomplishment. I guess it depends on the school.
Yeah.
I would say it hasn't had that happen with 2 backs since the Big 12 was formed in 1996. So far, I would say like that's a pretty big deal if it occurs. If Wisconsin did that, I mean, they damn near had 3 1,000-yard backs back in like 2013, 2012 under Brett Bielema.
And then they decided, by the way, to scrap that offense. We don't need that production. Let's bring in a new coach and let's start throwing the football around and look at how that's worked out for Wisconsin over
do the dairy raid, as they affectionately called it.
Yeah,
I think that they have the potential in terms of those top 2 to be like a middle of the pack Big 12 running back room.
Okay,
I don't think it's like super high ceiling, but I don't think the floor is horrible. What concerns me about this room is that they don't really necessarily have a proven third back. That's concerning because that's a position that obviously gets dinged up, suffers injuries. A year ago, they added Jalen Jackson, small, shifty, speedy back from Eastern Michigan, and it paid off for them. He had about 340, 350 rushing yards last year, had a handful of rushing touchdowns. Had a really good game for Iowa State against West Virginia, against Houston, and then probably his best game would have been a home game against Baylor. They didn't go make that type of addition this year. To me, that signals that they're very confident in what second-year back Dylan Lee can provide. And if not Lee, incoming true freshman River Peppers from Independence, Missouri, a 3-star prospect who committed to Iowa State over interest from Kansas State. A lot of Ivy League schools in Northwestern was also interested in him. He was very impressive throughout the spring and the summer. So I think that signals that they have confidence in Lee or Peppers, but neither one of those guys have contributed, in college football to a serious degree. So I think it's important for Hansen and Sama to stay healthy and then to also produce at, a little bit of a better level this year, a more consistent level, particularly for Sama.
Were Hall or Montgomery, were they high recruits or were they just those 3-star guys that just found a way to become really good players, at this program and based around, the system and their talents, obviously?
Yeah, they were both just great evals and great developmental stories for Iowa State. I think Breece Hall is probably the best developmental story for Iowa State, him or Will McDonald. I mean, both of those players very well.
Yeah.
As a Jets fan, like you said, I mean, McDonald's one of, I think, just 2 first-round draft picks in program history. And maybe the first since like the 70s or something. I'd have to double check that. McDonald being selected was before I covered the program. But I think Hall is probably as good of a developmental story as they've had. I think Montgomery, obviously a high-level NFL back as well. But yeah, I mean, they don't get a ton of blue chip prospects. So neither Hall or Montgomery was, a 4 or 5-star prospect coming out of high school. And, that's a huge credit to Iowa State for finding them, evaluating them, and developing them once they got to Ames.
Okay. And how's their offensive line look? They bring in a lot of, looks like it's a veteran unit. Are they bringing a lot of returning starters back, at least 3 of them?
Yep, returning 3 starters on the offensive line. Tyler Miller returns as a right tackle. This will be his 3rd season starting there for the Cyclones. Brendan Black, he's never played center before, but he's going to move from right guard to center this year. He spent the offseason, the spring, learning how to snap. That's something that they talked a lot about. And then at left guard, Dylan Barrett returns. Barrett transferred in from Wisconsin last offseason. Hadn't played much as a Badger, but was one of Iowa State's best offensive linemen last year when he was healthy. He got rolled up on, I believe, and suffered a lower body injury against West Virginia. So that kept him in and out of the lineup as the season progressed after the win in Morgantown. And then left tackle, you can count this as like a half returner, I guess, as a starter. James Neal. He started the first 2 or 3 games last season, and then Jalen Travis, the offensive lineman selected by the Colts in the 4th round, got healthy, started for them at left tackle throughout the remainder of the season. But Neal was their starting left tackle in 2023 when they went to the Liberty Bowl. And he's someone that they probably need to be a little bit better than he was back in 2023. He's a really good athlete. They really like his quickness, his good footwork, things like that. But I feel like they needed to improve his tenacity, his physicality, maybe even his football IQ as a former JUCO product. He's someone who I would expect to start at left tackle this year. If not him, I think Garrett Rutledge, a second-year player for the Cyclones, could start at offensive tackle on the left side. He's someone that I know Matt Campbell internally is really high on. And then at right guard, with Black moving to center, the name I would identify as Trevor Burr. Last season, Dylan Barrett, when he was hurt, Burr started for them at left guard. So to me, it's most logical that Burr would start at right guard for the Cyclones. Got really good size, can be really physical. If it's not Burr, I would expect it to be Dalen Hazard, who starts at right guard.
Yeah, we don't have Rutledge here. So what's his story?
Yeah, small town kid from Iowa, not a name that a lot of people probably know too well. Believe he was a member of the 2024 recruiting class. He, I mentioned a little bit earlier in the 2024 class or in the 2025 class, they had a good run of late offensive linemen to join the class. It was a similar situation in 2024, and Rutledge is one of those kids. He's from Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is right on the border with Omaha. Not really a small town. It's a bigger town, honestly, in Iowa, but was an unheralded kid that came about their desk shortly before signing day, was a top 15 or 20 recruit in the state by 24/7 Sports. Really big kid, 6'5", 6'6", carries his weight really well. Kind of has gotten to a point where he's lean, I would say, like seeing him around campus this summer, seeing him in the facility this summer. He looks how you want an offensive tackle to look. I don't think he's going to start for them this year, but he certainly has a ceiling that they're very high on inside of the program.
Okay. Let's look at the defense now. So give me who's the leader of this defense?
It's got to be Dominique Orange, the defensive tackle. He was incredibly good last year in the last 6 games of the season. He had more pressures in the last 6 games of the season than he did in the first 8 games of the season combined. I think it was 13 pressures from the interior position of Iowa State's 3-3-5 defense. I would expect him to play exclusively on the interior of the Cyclone defensive line this year. He kind of had the versatility in the past to play both defensive end and nose tackle, but he's much more of a nose tackle than he is a defensive end. Okay. Someone who, coming out of high school, had offers from all the best programs in the country. He was a COVID-era kid, and during that time, from what I was told, I didn't cover his recruitment, but from what I was told from people who did, is he gained a lot of bad weight, wasn't in the best shape, had lost a lot of those major opportunities. I know Georgia had offered him, I believe Texas had as well. Those opportunities moved on, and Iowa State took a chance on him, kind of on the urging of his high school coach, who was like, just give him a chance. He just needs a structure. He just needs to be in a program. And he's really performed well for Iowa State, and he particularly so in the last 6 games of last season. I think that in terms of offseason acquisitions or players returning or coming into the program, Dominique Orange, in my opinion, is the number 2 player of significance for that behind Beck. Like, he arguably is their best player, regardless of position. Like, he's going to be an NFL draft pick, probably a day 2 guy right now, I would project. Big, physical, quick. They're going to challenge him to play 60 to 70% of snaps this fall. A year ago, he's closer to 40%. So that's a big challenge for him with the conditioning. But he's someone who has taken it on head first and seems really excited about the opportunity this fall.
Okay. Where are the sacks going to come from?
It's a good question. They had just 16 a season ago. I think they had just 31 quarterback hits a season ago, according to PFF. That number probably needs to increase. I think some of it could come from the linebacker position with Caleb Bacon being healthy again. We talked about the Yale transfer, Tamatoa McDonough, a little bit earlier. I think he had 6.5 sacks last season at Yale. I think Iowa State hopes that the transition to the Big 12 isn't too overwhelming for McDonough. He's someone who could give them positive production in the pass rush. I also think that you could potentially see an improvement from Ikenna Ezeagu. He's someone who they probably played more than they anticipated last year. And I know Matt Campbell has said positive things about the way he played, but I think that he can continue to take a step forward as he enters what should be his third year in the program this fall. I think he's a big X factor just for their defense in general because they have so many moving parts on their defensive line. He's a holdover from last season. He's someone who should be capable of playing a bigger and more productive role with Tyler Onyedem transferring to Texas A&M, with J.R. Singleton and Joey Peterson both exhausting their eligibility.
Okay. And they have some young guys that produced last year. Abel, Jontez Williams, I think Deshaun James, they put up some decent numbers for young kids. Is there, give me a breakout player or two from the holdovers on defense?
Yeah, I would go Marcus Neal. He's probably going to replace Bo Freyler at the star position. Freyler was a multi-year starter, multi-year captain. You get Matt Campbell to talk about Bo Freyler, and he's probably going to speak as highly of him as he is any player in his tenure at Iowa State. Okay. And that includes Brock Purdy, that includes Breece Hall, David Montgomery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Allen Lazard. Like, in terms of the character, yeah, he might speak higher of Bo Freyler than any player he's coached. Like, he's called him maybe the best leader he's ever coached. So that speaks really highly of him.
Where did he end up?
He had a ton of health issues throughout his career, lots of shoulder issues. He is not playing any longer.
Too bad.
It is. Really nice kid, bright kid, passionate about Iowa State football, obviously. But he suffered a lower body injury. I believe it was a knee injury against Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And that allowed Neal, a former four-star prospect in the 2024 class, to step in and play.
Okay.
And it might have been a blessing in disguise because now Neal is probably going to start for them at that same position. And really compact athlete. Like, you see him, he's stacked. Got big traps, arms, shoulders, great shape. Someone who, I mean, you can just kind of see it in that picture, right? Like, chiseled jawline.
Doesn't look like a defensive back.
No, big, thick neck, right? Like, this kid, I'm high on him. I think he has the potential to be one of Iowa State's better defensive players. I think he should be a starter for them this upcoming season. And he certainly had a good freshman season for Iowa State a year ago.
All right. Any other players to keep an eye on, potential breakouts on defense?
I don't know if I would define this necessarily as a breakout as much as I would bounce back. They probably need free safety Jeremiah Cooper to play better than he did a season ago.
That's right. Yeah.
Cooper back in 2023 led the team with 5 picks, was much better in coverage, was a more reliable tackler than he was in 2024, excuse me. Speaking with him at Big 12 Media Days, he said that was like the worst season of football he's ever played, dating back to when he was a kid. He was very disappointed in it, obviously. He prided himself on having a much better senior season, being a consistent leader for them, being someone who can be counted on to contribute at a more respectable level, I guess you could say, as he enters his 2025 season. I think that Cooper is saying all the right things, and the staff seems to be saying a lot of the right things as he enters his final season with the program. But does he put it all together and play closer to the 2023 level that he did? Because if he does, I think he's got like all Big 12 potential and could be like a mid to late NFL draft pick.
Yeah. He totally forgot that he had wondered why he wasn't playing well, particularly last year after the 2023. So that would be big. And I noticed Williams, like I said, he put up some decent numbers. I think he led the team in interceptions, I believe,
Correct.
last year.
4.
Okay. And again, that could be misleading. But is there anyone that, because we know how big the losses are at receiver, and you just mentioned the linebacker, and of course Porter at corner is another one, as far as guys that have left the program. What would you say outside of the two receivers and give me like a position, or maybe even mention a player that the team lost either through graduation or transfer that you think they're going to have a hard time replacing?
That's a good question. Outside of the receivers that they're going to have a hard time replacing,
Yeah.
I would probably go to Jalen Travis in having to go back to James Neal. I don't think Travis allowed a sack in any play last year. Beyond that, a step further, in talking with their offensive line coach this spring, I don't know how true this is, but the way he phrased it to me was that Jalen Travis never lost a rep during practice last season. So that seems like a difficult thing to replace, in my opinion. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, Neal wasn't nearly as productive as they probably would have liked in 2023, but he's got more experience. This is his 3rd or 4th year in the program. He got an opportunity to develop kind of in the shadows last year as a tackle. I think that could be valuable for them. So I think replacing Travis is probably going to be difficult for them. And, we didn't have to talk about him a lot last year because he was just
you like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like anytime you have to talk about the offensive line, right? The old saying goes like, that's not a good thing.
No.
And we didn't have to talk about them too much. Like they had poor moments or questionable moments, but they never had like outwardly horrible games like they did in 2023, where like they could not run the ball against Memphis in that Liberty Bowl that they lost.
Okay, let's wrap up. You mentioned, of course, the big game that is going to be that's it over in Ireland, right? The kickoff game.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you think about that? I mean, that's kind of unusual to play overseas conference matchup to start the season. Because that's right. Like you said, I mean, man, right out of the gate, you got to play a really tough opponent in conference, and you got to do it in a weird environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think this is the 2nd time a conference game, the 3rd time, I guess, a conference game has occurred over there in Ireland and since COVID. Obviously, Nebraska, Northwestern won that game, and last year Georgia Tech stunned Florida State. Well, stunned at the time. We thought it was
at the time. Yeah.
It did not end up being very surprising. I would say it's performed well against Kansas State the last few years. They obviously won last year, 2023. They won a 42-35 game in Manhattan in the snow. Even in 2022, the year that Kansas State won the Big 12, weird game. They won against Iowa State 10-9 at Jack Trice Stadium. Matt Campbell's done a really good job coaching against Chris Kleiman. I'm not going to outwardly say like he owns Chris Kleiman.
Okay.
But he's shown himself to kind of have like an upper hand in this series, I would say. I think that's fair. I think it's a fascinating game. I think each team enters it with, frankly, like a lot on the line, just because the Big 12 is so wide open and so hard to project and predict. And if you lose this game, you're already in the hole in the Big 12 title race, and something that is probably going to be really congested, and something that it's probably going to come down to tiebreakers like it did a year ago. And if these two teams are in the race come the end of November, the loser of that game is probably going to look back on it and be like, there's a big indicator of where the tiebreaker is going to go. Should be a really good game. Two teams that obviously are very familiar with each other. I think Kansas State returns a little bit more production. When you think about Avery Johnson returning at quarterback, obviously Dylan Edwards returns. They have to replace DJ Giddens. Jace Brown returns at receiver. They have a really good linebacker core. A couple of really good safeties or defensive backs in general, I should say. K-State does. I think it's a really fascinating game. I think K-State's like an early 3-point favorite. I don't know how strongly I feel one way or the other at this point. I don't know how strongly I'll feel about the game going one way or the other come August 23rd. Like, I think it's a coin flip game, like 80% of every other Big 12 game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a fascinating matchup. And I think that, I've written about this. I've said it on the radio. If you win, right, like you're going to feel awesome. And then if you go beat Iowa in what is week 2 for you, week 3 for you, week 2 for everyone else, like you're going to look like you're going to feel phenomenal about yourself.
Sure.
Because you're going to have 2 rivalry wins. You then get a pretty easy stretch of the schedule with, you have to go on the road to play Arkansas State. And I don't think going on the road to play a G5 team is ever advisable, but you then get Arizona and Cincinnati. Like if you start 3-0 and then you handle your business against Arkansas State and you beat Arizona and Cincinnati like you're supposed to, you're 5-0 for a second straight season before your schedule kind of starts to ramp up with the road game at Colorado. And then you get BYU. I think you could argue that 2 of Iowa State's 3 most difficult games, 4 most difficult games are within their first 3 games of the season. So there's a lot riding on those. And like I said, to kind of open the episode, we're going to learn quite a bit about how good or bad Iowa State is within the first 3 weeks of the season, I think.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be another carbon copy of last year in this conference that you just have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, you read like a Phil Steele preview magazine or like, I had to do a preseason poll for us at 24/7, and it's like, I don't know how to
come on.
It's like the personnel is the same everywhere. And I think that's part of the fun of it, right? But it's also part of the headache and how a team goes from being picked 16th to, winning the league.
That's right. Well, and that's like you said, the quarterback situation is actually better than I think most people would think. It's just a Big 12, and compared to the top 2 conferences, it's down. But there are good quarterbacks, including the game in Ireland. I mean, that's 2 of those quarterbacks you're talking about. And I think that's really what's going to separate these teams is which one of those quarterbacks will take that next step and be that top quarterback, first team, Big 12 at the end of the year. Whoever that is might be the guy who's leading their team to the Big 12 championship game.
Which I think you could argue that like you've seen in the last couple of years in the Big 12 is that like the team with the most productive or consistent quarterback production has won the league, right? Like last year, Sam Leavitt was probably the most consistent quarterback. He was healthy throughout the season, aside from the one game he missed with concussion against Cincinnati that they lost. 2023, I think, Quinn Ewers missed time, obviously, that season, but when he was healthy, he was really good. Go back to 2022, K-State won the league, but obviously TCU played for a national championship. Max Duggan was healthy throughout the entire season and was a Heisman runner-up. Go back to 2021. That's a little bit different because Baylor had a late quarterback situation. But, as you look at it this year, I do agree with you that I think quarterback play, who's consistent at the top of the league, who's healthy at the top of the league at that position will be really important in the Big 12. And I think it was Sonny Dykes at Big 12 Media Days who said something along the lines of the team that wins the conference is going to be the team that has most consistent and healthy quarterback play. And it's hard to disagree with him because the teams are so congested. And it's like when teams are hard to separate, what separates them is the teams that, don't make stupid mistakes. And a lot of times inexperienced quarterbacks or quarterbacks who, are unreliable make more of those silly mistakes.
Yeah. And have good coaching, which both Iowa State and Kansas State have. And so that's why this is a really good kickoff game. That should be very interesting. Iowa State is, let's see, their win total is 7.5. So that's plus 115. The under is minus 135. So it's a little bit under 7.5. But based on this schedule, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if they go over the total, then they're going to be one of those teams at the end fighting for a conference championship. And what do you think?
Like I said, team? I mean, like I said at the beginning, like on paper, I'm not as high on this team as I was last season's team. Like I looked at last season's team on paper and I was like, okay, this team can go win a Big 12 championship. They came really close. I mean, they got to the game in Arlington. I don't have the same feeling when I look at this year's team on paper, but you hear national people talk about them and they include them within the teams at the top tier. I think Phil Steele, for example, in his preseason magazine had them top 3 in the Big 12. I think he may have had them tied for first, like he did like 4 or 5 teams. So that kind of tells me that like Matt Campbell's really high on them because national media wouldn't.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Matt
like
coach
media,
quarterback.
Like national media is more connected to him in terms of access to him and their ability to send him a text than I would be. Like, I've had national press members tell me that Campbell really likes this team. I don't like him as much on paper as I did previous teams that I've had or that he's had here. But yeah, I mean, I think they're a 7-9 win team.
Yeah.
Again, and I think the difference between winning 7 games in the Big 12 and the difference between winning 9 games in the Big 12 is a comeback against Utah that includes a pretty fun trick play from your running back to your tight end via a pass, and a comeback against a pretty poor UCF team on a 2-minute drill.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was literally the difference of it for Iowa State last season. So I think it's going to be the same thing for Iowa State this year. I expect them to go to a bowl game. I think that they will get to a postseason appearance. I just think it's hard to be like, okay, this team's going to a Big 12 championship because the league is so congested. And I hate saying that over and over again, but like that's where my reality is for this conference. So I think 7-9 wins is where I settle at. And I think 7.5 is a great number because I think if it was 6.5, too many people would take the over because of what Iowa State has had for the last decade under Campbell. So 7.5 makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. They're the 7th right here. The odds of winning the conference are actually 7th according to Vegas. So I'm a little surprised that Utah is 3rd. Baylor, again, quarterback. TCU, quarterback. Texas Tech is the intriguing team, I think.
I agree. I think Utah, you mentioned Utah being surprising. Like, to me, that makes sense because Morgan Scalley always has a really good defense. Kyle Whittingham has always had a good defense, even last year when they went from preseason favorite in the conference to, slumping quite a bit. Their defense gave them a chance nearly every weekend. They have probably the best offensive line in the conference. They have a first-round NFL draft pick at offensive tackle. They have probably another first-round or all Big 12 first-teamer at tackle. So their floor there is really high. I think Devin Dampier will probably have to reel in some of his interception issues that he had last year in New Mexico. Yeah. But man, that kid can run. And I know that Utah is going to be able to run the football and their defense is going to be good. Like, to me, that's a really good combo. So their floor is high. And you talked about Tech. Like, to me, I had a really good conversation with Shehan Jiraja of CBS at Big 12 Media Days because he wrote that awesome feature story on Texas Tech and the money that they've infused into the roster.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people see it and they're like, oh, well, they're paying money because they want to win a national championship. I think you talk to people inside the Texas Tech program, and the way Shehan put it to me was they don't expect to win a national championship with this roster. I don't think anyone who looks at the roster thinks it's a national championship roster. The way he put it to me was like, they hope that paying for this roster makes 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those Big 12 toss-up games no longer coin flips. And those become wins for Texas Tech because of the depth that they have.
Sure.
The talent they have on the offensive and defensive lines. And, those 3 or 4 toss-up games go Texas Tech's way no matter what because of what they assembled. And now instead of playing, 8 toss-up games in the Big 12, you only have to play 4 or 5. And if you win 3 of those 4 or 5 and you handle your business in the games that you should, you've now won 6 or 7 Big 12 games and you're probably at the top of the tie-breaking formula or just getting to Arlington that way. But Tech is obviously struggled to sustain any sort of significant success post Mike Leach.
They don't know what that feels like, and that's a problem.
No. I mean, they haven't won 9 games since Mike Leach was there. So, Tech's fascinating to me. To me, they're the most interesting team in the Big 12.
Well, I think it is going to be another fun year in the Big 12 as always. By the way, before I let you go, I mean, what happened in that Big 12 championship game last year? That was just so out of character. It's like something weird just took place. And look, Arizona State I guess it just happened to be team of destiny last year. They came a 4th and 13 away from beating Texas. I'm surprised they didn't fire the defensive coordinator for calling a blitz on that play. But still, it must have been a real big shock to the Iowa State fans to watch that game unfold the way that it did.
Yeah, I think that game in Arlington was a really good microcosm of just like all the injuries that were starting to pile up on defense. They could not tackle Cam Scatteraboo that Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon in Jerry World. I think that led to a lot of big plays. And then things kind of started to really unravel for them, I guess you could say, in like the last few minutes of the second quarter and then throughout the third quarter, where Arizona State was able to just run away with it because of Iowa State mistakes, whether it was a fumble here or an interception there. I think Rocco threw a pick. And then Arizona State just really capitalized on them. I think going into halftime, Arizona State had like a 24-10 lead, and they got the ball after halftime after Iowa State chose to not push it and try and score on their last possession of the second quarter, if I remember correctly. And then Arizona State just completely jumped on the Cyclones in the third quarter, and 24-10 turned to 31-10. And then I think a quick mistake turned into another touchdown. So then it's 38-10.
Yeah.
Midway through the third quarter, and the game's over.
Sure.
I certainly think Arizona State was better than Iowa State last year, but I also think Iowa State just didn't show up that very much that day.
Which is unusual.
It is. It is very much unusual. I mean, they only had one other game like that. It was probably the game against Kansas, where they just kind of got blown out in Arrowhead. But yeah, I think that, it's certainly an embarrassing showing, one that still eats at them. I know Matt Campbell talked about like they're still a pain, when they get back to the Arlington, Dallas, Frisco area, that still exists for them based off of the way they played. And for him, it dates back to the way they played in 2020 in that game against Oklahoma and the way that game went. So they obviously want to get back there. I think this team, if everything comes together, like it could happen for them again. But yeah, we'll have to see if everything comes together for them. Which it didn't a year ago, and they still got there, which I think says a lot about last year's team.
Yeah, well, that's why I was just intrigued by it, because again, knowing Matt Campbell, and it's very unusual to see him, have his team just look like they did in that game, especially with the talent that they have, and I'm going to use that as motivation. So, Alec, this was great. Thank you very much for informing our viewers and, of course, myself about what's going on with Iowa State football this year. And if things work out and they get off to a nice start, then I'll definitely give you a little ring, and maybe we can preview a game or two this season. That would be nice.
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks for having me on. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, always fun to talk football, and obviously with the season just about a month away, I think everyone's itching for college football to be back and ready for all the politics of media days.
Oh no! And like you said, training camp today. So there you go.
Correct.
Good timing. Thank you, Alec.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You got it. All right, that's Alec Busse, and again, Alec is with the website Cyclone Alert 247. So you could also catch him on the radio at KXNO, the first quarter. That's where he co-hosts the show there for the program. And this is, I believe, the third Big 12 interview we've had. Oklahoma State, BYU as well. Hopefully we'll have more. I know we have Utah coming up. Let's see. Do we have anyone else coming up here? Just Utah. I believe that's all we have coming up so far. But I'm trying. I mean, trust me, I send out requests all over. A lot of the times we'll bring in guys that have been with us before, but sometimes, we get someone like Alec who we've never interviewed before, and hopefully Alec will be a part of what we're doing for the future, because it would be nice to get that opportunity to talk about Iowa State football on a regular basis. Okay, so I believe that's it for interviews this week, which is actually okay considering we had so many last week. But next week we have more. Matter of fact, Utah is next week. That's going to be on Monday, and Iowa is on Tuesday. Let's see who else. If I can squeeze here and see. Oh, you know what? We're going to talk. Even though we're not going to talk about a specific team, we are going to be talking college football. Don't forget, Thursday at 1:00. We will be previewing the SEC on the Playbook ATS podcast. That's when all the top handicappers here on ProLine get together. And then on Friday, Zach Barnett is going to join me from Football Scoop. and we're going to just talk about a variety of topics in college football. So that's going to be 4 o'clock live on Friday right here on ProLine TV in the Our Football Network. So that's going to wrap it up. Again, thanks to Alec Busse, and I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you again